Good evening, everybody. Tomorrow, actually, we're going to be looking at Chapter 17, and we're going to be looking at what's called payout policy. And the payout policy is basically how the firm is going to choose between alternative ways to distribute its free cash flow to the equity holders. And it can do it in two ways, right? One of two ways. It can pay a dividend, or it can repurchase shares from current owners. And this is known as the payout policy. So here's a good chart, right? And this chart, I just wanted to actually give you an introduction, is on page 598. So here is the free cash flow, and they could retain the this free cash flow and invest it in new projects, right? If they retain it, this is retained earnings, right? Or they can increase the cash reserves that they physically have, right? Or if they choose not to retain it, they're going to use a payout policy here, and they're going to say, how should we pay this out? And it'll either be in dividends, which a lot of you know about, we talked about that, or it will be in repurchase some of the shares that are out there. So this has four branches, but the two big ones we're going to talk about are these dark blue lines right here. Alright, so there's a couple dates we have to know about, and this is a good time to look at the chart here. And before we go to the chart, let's just see the definition of these dates. The declaration date will be and we'll talk about this obviously in detail, the date on which the board of directors authorizes the payment of a dividend. And the record date is when a firm pays a dividend. Only shareholders on record on this date receive the dividend. In other words, the shareholders who have purchased on that date, on that record date. So just to go into a little more detail on that, the firm basically the firm will pay the dividend to all shareholders of record on a specific date set by the board, called the record date. So that's the record date, and all of these are on basically page 598 in your book. You can you can look at it. So I just want to give you a couple-minute introduction to where we're going to go. The ex-dividend date is a date 2 days prior, as you can see here, to the dividend's record date, on or after which anyone buying the stock will not be eligible for the dividend. So basically, if you buy a stock on the ex-dividend date, which is 2 days prior to the record date, you will not get the dividend. And the distribution or payable date is simply going to be the date within a month after the record date on which the firm mails the dividend checks to its registered stockholders. Or in my case, I will use that. I won't even see that money. It goes into my my brokerage account, my e-brokerage account with TIAA, and it just buys additional shares. I've chosen to buy additional shares, so that was my option. All right, so here's a chart that basically shows the days in time, and it's good to watch. Here's when the board declares a dividend on July 20th, and buyers of stock on or after this date do not receive the dividend. And you'll notice here November 15th, and the shareholders of recorded by this date received the dividend. So if you bought the stock basically before this, you will get this dividend. You'll be recorded at that point. And this is when basically here's the date when they receive the check, or it goes or they give you additional shares, depending on how you set it up. So this is an important chart, and everyone should know what this is, right? So remember, there's a 2-day difference here, and you can see that right here. All right, so a couple terms you'll notice occasionally is this: if you own stocks, you may get a special dividend, and this is a one-time dividend that a company will make, which is normally much larger than a regular dividend. And basically, I received one from Costco I guess several months back, and basically I was surprised by it. All right, and I'll show you that in a minute. And then there's the stock split, right? When a company issues a dividend in shares of stock rather than cash to its shareholders. So basically, many times a company will issue a dividend in shares of stock rather than cash, and they'll just give you additional shares from the treasury account. This is a little different than the normal stock split we know about. All right, so let me just, I want to just show you, I believe I have the internet up here, so we can look at this. Let me just see if I can bring this up. A lot of stuff going on with the budget and everything, the health bill, and what can we do? Got to put up with it all. Football and... All right, so let me see. Costco. Costco special dividend. Here it is. So this is the one I received. Let's see. Here it was. Costco to pay special dividend of $7 increases quarterly dividend. That was on April 25th, 2017. So I did see a special dividend that came in. And it increased its quarterly dividend by 5 cents. They had a ton of cash and a strong balance sheet here. And so they were doing real well. So that does happen in real life. All right, so here's a good chart that basically shows dividend history for GM, General Motors, and for 1983 to 2008. Here they had a 2-for-1 stock split, right? Basically, they doubled the amount of shares, but they would have the dividend. So you don't really gain any extra money, of course. So if you had one share that paid $1, now you have 2 shares that pays a 50-cent dividend. That doesn't go up, right? So so this was all adjusted for the split. And this is unadjusted here. All right, so basically just so this chart, just so everyone is aware, is on page 17.3. July 2008, basically they suspended their dividend. I believe it was sometime around there, right? And then they had a lot of problems. They filed for bankruptcy in June of 2009, and there was a lot of problems, and you can read about that actually in your book. It's actually quite interesting. All right, so the return of capital is a firm instead of paying dividends out of current earnings or accumulated retained earnings, pays dividends from other sources such as paid-in capital or the liquidation of assets. So this would be a way that instead of taking the cash from the retained earnings, right, or the current earnings, we'll take it out of another account, the paid-in capital account or the liquidation. They will liquidate other assets. All right, and then there's a term called a liquidating dividend. And a liquidating dividend is a return of capital to shareholders from a business operation that's being terminated, and they'll give that money back to the stockholders. So again, this is all of this is on page 600. These terms are on 600. All right, so here's the other big one. So the alternative way to pay cash to investors is through a share repurchase or buyback, and they'll use their cash to buy shares of its own outstanding stock. So this is the other big way, and there's been a battle over the last couple of years about which one has done more, and we'll talk more about that. All right, so I'm about 10 minutes into this. I don't want it to get any bigger. So I will see everybody tomorrow, and then we'll go further along on here. Have a good evening.